Whitlock hoping it doesn't need overtime. He's going to run it. Look at this, Devin Whitlock, as he gets the go-ahead touchdown from 40 yards.
Live from our Seton Hill University studios, this is Westmoreland on the Gridiron on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here's your host, Sean Meyers.
Welcome into another edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger here at Seton Hill University. Another jam-packed show to get to here tonight. We got a lot of good content upcoming, including all of the scores from Week 4 and the top performers, the always popular plays of the week. Dave Keefer, the Greensburg Salem one, will be our...
Make sure you specify.
We have two Dave Keefers who are football coaches in Westmoreland County. This is Dave Keefer guiding the Golden Lions to a terrific start to the season. We'll talk to him a little bit later. His team coming off of an impressive victory and looking ahead to another big-time showdown this upcoming Friday. We'll also talk to Brayden Dunmire, our player of the week of the Kiski area Cavaliers, in a terrific defensive performance. And we'll look ahead at all the games upcoming over this weekend with the Week 5 preview. But Flick, we look back and, man, there were some terrific outcomes for Westmoreland County teams, some real thrillers. And I think that the one that you and I saw firsthand, we will remember for a long, long time. Bell Vernon area, almost a buzzer beater, defeating Thomas Jefferson. Devin Whitlock with the play of the year, I would say, in the WPIAL, as his team scores a 28-21 victory. And now the biggest thing for me is that despite the injury to Quentin Martin, they are in the driver's seat when it comes to all of 4A.
You know, it's nice. The silver lining, I guess, with Quentin Martin is you've already beaten Thomas Jefferson. He tweets after the game that the injury, or actually the next day, I guess, on Saturday, the injury's not as bad as initially feared. Now, what that means, we don't know, but at least you got through Thomas Jefferson with him helping you, and now hopefully he can get healthy enough for, you know, even the playoffs, Sean, because let's face it, you know, Bell Vernon, in my opinion, should be able to run the table with or without Quentin Martin. They get to the playoffs, they hopefully get the number 1 seed, and then you have Quentin back in the fold, hopefully, at that point. But, I mean, this game, it was everything that you hoped for. You know, going in, we had a feeling it was going to be a great game, and we weren't exactly going out on a limb to feel that way, because usually those games are between those two teams. But, man, Bell Vernon, you know, the way that they were able to persevere despite seeing Quentin Martin go down, and Devin Whitlock, who is just so you just have no idea what the kid's going to do. I don't know if he knows what he's going to do when he drops back. I mean, he ad-libs so well. He's just so hard to scheme for. And, you know, if you go back and watch those two plays, you know, probably the two biggest plays of the game, obviously the Devin Whitlock touchdown at the end, the 40-yard run was absolutely unbelievable with just 4 seconds left. But I thought the other big play of the game, Sean, was the kick return by Quentin Martin, which, you know, put Bell Vernon back in the lead 14-13 after TJ missed that extra point. They were able to get that momentum right back after TJ scored. If you look back at both of those plays, who threw a huge block in both of those plays? And that was Cole Waitman. I mean, the kid is just unbelievable. If you didn't notice that, folks, go back and watch those two plays, the kick return and Devin Whitlock's run. Cole Waitman planted a kid on each of those plays. So while obviously you got to give credit to Q, as they call him, and obviously Devin Whitlock, you know, there's other guys on the team that made huge plays in that game too that are kind of unsung heroes.
Yeah, and again, that gives them the inside track, speaking of the Leopards. If they win out, they will be, in all likelihood, the number 1 seed. I can't imagine it going any other way. That's not to say that they're going to have an easy path, because they do not, including this upcoming game. But the other thing is, I think the most important aspect, they now know they can defeat Thomas Jefferson. And there's a good likelihood they will see the Jaguars again. Now, you go back 2017, Bell Vernon won the regular season matchup, lost in the playoffs. But this is a whole new group of players. And now, after losing the last couple of years to TJ, they now have that confidence.
They do. And you asked Matt Humbert about that, you know, clearing that hurdle, being able to defeat Thomas Jefferson now, but also doing so in the playoffs. As we mentioned last week, a couple of years ago, Bell Vernon wins in the regular season, and they lose pretty handily in the playoffs. So as Matt said last week during your talk with him, he said, hey, even if we win this game, there's a lot more football to be played no matter how this game goes. So if I'm Bell Vernon, I'm still thinking, hey, we can still get better. You know, even though we're going to be favored in all these games, we're in the driver's seat right now, we can continue getting better no matter who we're playing.
A team that I think got a lot better last week over the prior couple weeks was Mount Pleasant, as the Vikings had, I think, a pretty surprising victory. Not the fact that they defeated rival Southmoreland, but they did so pretty handily, 34-7 against the Scotties. That's always a highly anticipated matchup and one that the Vikings looked very prepared for. They got Tyler Reese back. He was dynamic, both throwing the football and running it on offense, and then the play he made defensively that I think was probably the biggest play of the game with the pick six. So to knock off a Southmoreland team that had some real momentum, that was the conference opener for the Vikings. And maybe you look at those setbacks, okay, they lost to a 5A team, they lost to a 4A team, but in 3A, they can certainly hang with the best of them.
And that's what we thought going in. I didn't know that the score would be like this, but I thought it was a toss-up. I thought maybe Southmoreland would be favored just because of how great of a season they were having and because Mount Pleasant lost the last 2 weeks in pretty convincing fashion. But as you mentioned, you kind of had in the back of your head, back of your mind, like, okay, well, Mount Pleasant lost the last 2 weeks, but look who they played against, schools bigger than them, Latrobe and Greensburg Salem. And even though Latrobe got one hung on them last week, they've been a solid team this year. And, of course, Greensburg Salem's had a really good year so far. So you're thinking, okay, who are the real Vikings? Are they the ones from the first 2 weeks, or are they the ones from the last 2 weeks? We'll see when they actually get into 3A conference play. And I thought they were very, very impressive. You mentioned Tyler Reese coming back, doing what he did. I know he was held out. He probably could have played the week before, but it was a case of, hey, let's not get him, further injured in a non-conference game. We need him for conference games.
And it was the right decision, apparently.
Obviously, he was fresh. And then Labuda, 195 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He was, and also caught a touchdown pass, by the way. So he was very strong too. So, When you look at this Mount Pleasant team, so the prognosticators, it's so difficult sometimes to look at teams and see how they're going to be because they haven't played a conference game yet. They haven't played a team that maybe has the same number of players that they do, that type of thing. And they got off to a great start in conference play, we'll tell you that. And how about Southmoreland, man? It was surprising, that's for sure. I didn't think the score would be this lopsided for sure.
It's one of the first times that Anthony Govern hasn't seemed like one of the best players on the field because we're used to seeing him throw for 2 or 3 touchdowns, rush for 2 more. He did account for their only score, but by the same token, I think it was a relatively quiet night by his standards, and you give credit to the Vikings defensively for that.
And I thought Dave Keefer, after the game summed it up pretty well.
Southmoreland.
Yes,
Dave
I'm
Keefer.
sorry. Yeah, we'll be talking with the GS, Dave Keefer, later. He said we got our butts kicked. Hats off to Mount Pleasant. We got our butts kicked. He's a guy that's not going to, lay down any nonsense. He's going to tell it like it is. And really, when you look back at the game, that's what happened. But if you're Southmoreland, hopefully you can kind of bury that one and go at it this week.
Couple teams that don't have to bury a loss from a week ago are Kiski area and Ligonier Valley. And this was, I think, a big test for the Cavaliers. Both they and the Rams were perfect coming into week 4. They were both trying to go to 5-0, and they did. Kiski area did so against a pretty established powerhouse team in West Allegheny. Listen to this final score. Kiski area 7, West Allegheny 0. That is old school football.
It's a shootout. Shootout.
It was a lot of defense. We're going to hear from one of the stars of that defensive effort with Brayden Dunmire coming up a little bit later, our player of the week. But, man, for the Cavaliers to win a game, albeit against a West Allegheny team that didn't have some of their key players, they didn't have their starting quarterback, that's still a gutsy win. Now they're 5-0. That's great. They have, I believe, matched their best start dating back to 1986.
You are correct, sir. I was 1 year old.
But they're 0-0 in conference play. So now the games really count, but you could not have asked for a better start if you're Coach Albert.
No, absolutely not. What a fantastic defensive effort. The other thing is, too, when you look back at that game, Kiski area actually had multiple opportunities to score more than just that one touchdown by Brock Wilkins. They had a couple of opportunities. They dropped a couple of passes that maybe could have went for 6. So, Kiski area could have won the game 14-0, maybe 21-0, but the defensive effort that they put up against West Allegheny was certainly unmatched. And, even though West Allegheny had some players out with injury, this is a great win for Kiski area to kind of keep rolling.
Yeah, you beat a team like West Allegheny, regardless of the circumstances, it's only going to help your confidence in the belief that they can make some noise once they get into the conference, which will begin this week. And we mentioned the other team that's now perfect. There are 3 undefeated teams in Westmoreland County. I don't think anyone was that surprised by Bell Vernon area heading into the last week. We knew that was going to be a challenge. They passed that. Kiski area knocks off West Allegheny. And then one I think you could have said clearly favoring the Westmoreland County team, Ligonier Valley going against Carrick. That's a City League independent team in Carrick, and the Rams took care of business 62-12. They are now 5-0. But one of the drawbacks to playing 5 non-conference games is that you can have some injuries that could handicap you once you get into the conference play. It seems like that's the case with the Rams. They're down now 3 key contributors that likely will not be back within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really is a shame. And we told you last week about Hayden Siraki being out, and they have some other players out as well, and some may be serious. We'll see if they are able to come back. It was nice to see that so much responsibility now Sean's going to go on Nick Beidel, and as you mentioned, they haven't played a conference game yet, and for the core players, he's one of the last guys remaining. So Beidel with a big game last week, 3 touchdowns, a lot of responsibility going to be on him. And Jacob Hay with another great game for Ligonier Valley last week defensively as well. Those are some of the guys that they're going to have to carry this torch now with some other questions in the injury front.
Yeah, really tough loss with Miles Higgins. Looks like he might be out long term. And then in the game against Carrick, Ryan Harbert went down. And we saw him when we went to the training camp previews. And he's a newcomer to the sport of football, but, man, he has made an immediate impact. He's been great defensively, so hope that they can get him back. But if you know anything about the Rams, they have a pretty good ability to replace some key players because we've seen them do that year after year. Now they're going to have to do it within the season, and they'll have a tough one coming up against Steel Valley. But, again, 5-0, they're showing that they are a pretty legit contender in the WPIAL.
They are, and it's about being a program. As I mentioned before, you have guys go down, you have other guys step in, and I don't want to use the Mike Tomlin, especially now because the Steelers are not very good. But you have guys go down, other guys come in, and you hope that they do well. And it's an interesting season for Ligonier Valley. Not only are they undefeated, but they also are able to kind of groom some guys here and really hope that they can carry the torch going forward. It's not a real big roster, Sean, compared to past years for Ligonier Valley. So, I mean, does that come in? Does that play a concern with Roger Beidel in terms of having less depth, I guess, this year? I don't know. But in terms of the overall numbers, a little bit lower than Ligonier Valley likes. But, again, you're going to have to count on some of the other guys that are still doing some big things to kind of carry the torch for them.
Yeah, there are no sophomores on the roster. Remember, last year they had no freshmen and just one senior, so it's primarily seniors and juniors this year, but maybe some of those freshmen will get elevated roles. We'll see, but the Rams have found a way to make it work so far as they improved to 5-0. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the entire Westmoreland County scoreboard in Week 4. We'll also run down the top performers, and a little bit later on, the Plays of the Week segment. Head coach Dave Keefer of Greensburg Salem. Brayden Dunmire, the standout for the Kiski area Cavaliers, and a Week 5 preview as we look ahead to this weekend's ledger of matchups. That's all to continue right here on Westmoreland on the Gridiron.
You're always on the winning team with Bowser Chevrolet of Monroeville and Bowser Chevrolet Chippewa. Visit BowserChevrolet.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get the power of Bowser in your hands. With the new Chevy vehicles arriving weekly, reserve yours now at Bowser Chevrolet. See the full lineup of Chevy cars, trucks, and SUVs at BowserChevrolet.com. Bowser Chevrolet, where the power of Bowser is yours.
This is how far we'll go to treat heart, lung, and vascular disease. 15 millimeters. At Excella Health, we believe less can be more. That's why we use
And we roll along here on Westmoreland on the Gridiron each and every Wednesday, 7 p.m. on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Coming to you from Seton Hill University. Sean and Dan talking high school football. And we talked about some of the biggest stories from this past week. But now let's look at the entire scoreboard in Westmoreland County. And we should preface this, Flick, that it was not, unfortunately, a full schedule. There was 2 games that did not take place, and they actually were of different situations. Dairy Area and Freeport rolled no contest. It did not affect either team's win-loss. However, Norwin had to forfeit to Seneca Valley because I guess the Knights had a larger roster.
Technically had the players to play.
Yes, it was.
And I think
still
Mike
deemed.
Burrow came out and said, like, hey, yes, we have the amount of players to play, but we're not putting a freshman in there at the offensive line position against, someone from Seneca Valley. So
yeah, and to be honest, it was going to be tough for Norwin at full strength to go against the Seneca Valley team. So I think you're kind of playing the long game there. And if you don't want to risk it, and potentially harm players and affect future weeks, then it's the right decision. No one wants to forfeit, and Norwin is the only team last year in 6A that did not have a game canceled as a result of COVID. So couldn't happen 2 straight years, unfortunately. But the Knights do take the forfeit loss to Seneca Valley, Dairy Area. It's, again, no contest against Freeport. For the games that did take place, we had a number that you can go back and watch or listen to on WestmorelandSports.com, including the aforementioned Bell Vernon area victory against Thomas Jefferson, 28-21 in favor of the Leopards. That was one of our video broadcasts, as was Mount Pleasant area knocking off Southmoreland, 34-7 in favor of the Vikings. You can go back and watch both of those. Also, Penn Trafford on a Saturday afternoon, beating up on the Shaler area Titans, 54-14 as the Warriors get back on track. They are now 3-2, so maybe not the record they were hoping for, but a little bit of momentum as they head back into conference play this week.
Yeah, again, you jump into conference play now, you're able to get a big win under your belt in terms of lopsided win, get some other guys in there, maybe work on some things. Again, that passing game, Penn Trafford continues to try to work on it. They get a 54-14 victory.
And that's a Shaler team that has been much improved. It's not the Shaler team from a couple years ago that was getting blown out. So decent bounce-back win for the Warriors, and now they'll play the games that really count. Franklin Regional, disappointing loss in this one as they fall to Bethel Park 28-13. It is the 4th straight loss for the Panthers. You can go back and watch that one as well. That was another one of our video broadcasts. And the audio broadcast from last week, Mount Lebanon makes quick work of Hempfield area, 48-14 in favor of the Blue Devils as the Spartans got their offense late in that one after the outcome had already been decided.
Sean, going back to that Franklin Regional loss to Bethel Park, you look at the scores that FR has lost by this year. They lost to Kiski by 10 points, Hempfield by 2, Fox Chapel by 4 points, and then Bethel Park a 28-13 loss. So it's not as if they're getting blown out by teams, but again, the record is what it is. It's 1-4.
Yeah, and you could sense, okay, they might be close. Maybe they will get one of those marquee wins. We thought they had it in week 0 against Plum, but now we see the Mustangs have struggled quite a bit. But for a new coach, it's about, okay, we have to set a foundation, and I think they've found some of those pieces who are going to be big-time players going forward. There's not a lot of seniors on the roster. They have a lot of juniors and sophomores contributing, so even if the wins don't come this year, as long as they play competitively, I think the future will be just fine.
And I think their schedule might set up favorably for them. They play at Connellsville this week. That should be a win. Woodland Hills might be a toss-up. There's a big game against Latrobe. And then you have PT and Gateway last. So you're hoping that you can be 3-0 maybe going into those games against PT and Gateway in terms of conference.
Yeah, certainly has to start with 1-0, however, against the Falcons. A non-conference game as well in 5A. South Fayette defeats Greater Latrobe 35-7. So for both the Panthers and the Wildcats, that wraps up their 5 non-conference games. They now jump into Big East play. Notable for Greater Latrobe, they were without Kyle Brewer in that game, the touchdown machine who had 9 scores in his first 3 games. They do anticipate that he'll be back. They also went exclusively with Corey Borio at quarterback. He had been splitting time with Brayden Riot. Looks like it's Borio's job until they get Bobby Fetter back. So they will have to play some good football. If they want to make the postseason, they are sitting at 2-3 after the non-conference. We mentioned Kiski area improves to 5-0, knocking off West Allegheny by the final score of 7-0. First loss on the campaign for the Indians. Greensburg Salem with a big victory. We're going to hear more about it a little bit later when I talk to head coach Dave Keefer. 35-14, knocking off Indiana area. Fourth consecutive victory for the Golden Lions, a team that really could be 5-0 if not for a late collapse against Hempfield area. And it was the passing attack early, but another situation where they showed that they can also run the football with some success. So that's a big win for Greensburg Salem.
Yeah, that was nice to be able to put the game away like they did late, but you mentioned that passing attack, man. Hayden Teska, after, again, having injury issues last year, us not being able to see his full potential, throws for 267 and 3 tutties, as they say. I mean, he was really good again last week. The receivers have been really good. Obviously a huge test for the Golden Lions this week against Hampton.
And the defense forced a number of turnovers against an Indiana offense that have been pretty explosive so far this season. Apollo Ridge 35, Burrell 17 as the Buccaneers fall to 0-5 on the season, as do the Yawk Cougars. They fall to South Allegheny 56-8. The first victory for the Gladiators comes at the expense of Yawk.
Shout out to Sean Benjamin, our former colleague.
Yes.
Offensive coordinator for the Gladiators now.
Now, was he ever with Yawk before?
He was.
Oh.
Yeah, so he may have had some of that on his mind. I don't know.
A little conflicted, Sean Benjamin. Deer Lakes wins another low-scoring affair, 6-0 against Valley, as the Vikings fall to 0-5. So we have a number of winless teams here in Westmoreland County. That's another throwback score, though, 6-0. You're thinking you're watching football maybe in the 1950s or something
3
like
yards
that.
in a cloud of dust.
Yep, absolutely. It worked for the Lancers, their second straight win. Ligonier Valley, as we mentioned, non-conference 62-12, defeating Carrick. They are now 5-0. Carrick falls to 0-5. By the way, Carrick, a City League team, but they are playing an independent schedule. Very unique. I think that's the first time that's happened in the Pittsburgh City League. Monty Christian edges Jeanette 14-7, another low-scoring one. So the Saints improved to 2-2. Jeanette falls to 1-4. Thought that was an opportunity for the Jayhawks to get in the win column. It did not happen, but they were at least competitive again in their conference. And you have to wonder, maybe with the exception of Clairton, Jeanette might be able to play fairly competitively against some of these opponents.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. They'll play Leechburg, which I think is a little better this year than maybe they've been.
Yeah, they can.
So that might
put up points.
That might be a really tough test for Jeanette, but they play them at home. And Sean, I just wanted to mention real quick, if I could, I want to send my condolences and our condolences out to the family of Brian Thomas, who unfortunately lost his life on Sunday morning. He was a Jeanette graduate, class of 1996, very close with our colleagues Brent Wiggum and Anthony D'Annunzio, very close friends with them. So again, our condolences go out. Brian was a heck of an athlete at Jeanette back again in the mid-90s, and I'm sure those guys will be talking about Brian on Friday night. There's actually going to be a video broadcast between Jeanette and Leechburg.
Yeah, and it's one of those years where Jeanette's clearly down, but I think it's been more of a celebration of all of the great tradition of this program. Yeah. You think about the better years, and there's been a lot of them for Jeanette. So, yeah, certainly you always think of the players who helped pave the way. Bishop Canavan defeats Greensburg Central Catholic. This took place on Saturday night, and it was a big one as the Crusaders go to 5-0. Greensburg Central Catholic falls to 3-2. A couple of interceptions looming large for the Centurions. That was a game that really you figure, okay, if GCC wants to get to where it believes it can be, that's a game that they probably need to win. But all of a sudden, Bishop Canavan could be one of the teams to beat in Class 1A, and of course you always look at the Clairton Bears, but for GCC that's a tough setback.
Really is disappointing, I'm sure, for Marco Thomas. Disappointing for the GCC fans to lose a game like that. Best start in 10 seasons, by the way, for Bishop Canavan, but 20-14 loss in a game that I think Central was down 20-7, and they scored to make it 20-14. But either way, GCC had some opportunities. They weren't able to capitalize on all of them, and I think it's a big game now for the Centurions at Springdale. Dynamos are always a really scrappy team, so it'll be a tough game, I think.
Yeah, and for GCC, the big question mark was, would all the pieces come together quick enough? Because a new head coach, and they had a number of players coming in via transfer, so you have to all make it work. And you were hoping by the time they began conference play that would be the case. Unfortunately, at least early in the conference season, they were not able to get it done. So GCC now sitting at 3-2 on the 2021 campaign. Monessen a team that's been getting it done. Third consecutive victory for the Greyhounds. They make quick work of Jefferson Morgan 26-0. Great to see that team bounce back after a really tough stretch over the last couple of years. They are on a 3-game surge. And lastly, the college scores around Westmoreland County. It was a tough one for Seton Hill. They fall to number 6 Slippery Rock 41-17. The Rock remains undefeated. Seton Hill now 2-2. However, it was Seton Hill that had the lead in the first quarter. There was some excitement. There was some belief. Things changed quite a bit over the next 2 quarters.
Unfortunately, they did. I think Slippery Rock ended up running off 34 unanswered points. But when you look at Seton Hill, they got off to the exact start that they wanted to, Sean. Slippery Rock gets the ball first. They throw an interception on, I think it was the first play of the game,
so.
Right?
First or second, yeah.
Tip ball, and DeMonte Pratt intercepts the pass. Seton Hill actually turns that into points immediately with a touchdown by Logan Weiland. Slippery Rock comes back and ties the game, but then the Griffins get a field goal by our man Luke Hogger.
Yeah, the hog pen was going wild.
The hog pen was going crazy, and Seton Hill was ahead 10-7, so they got another response there that they wanted to get, and then Slippery Rock showed why they're the number 6 team in the country. We mentioned many times how Seton Hill's defense is legit. Yes, they gave up actually 34 points because one was a pick 6. So you think 34 points, I mean, how can a defense be legit? Slippery Rock, I mean, their receivers were catching everything. Seton Hill had good coverage a lot of the times. They'd stick up one hand and reel it in with one hand. I mean, it was unbelievable the way that the passing game clicked for Slippery Rock like it's done all year long. So I think it was more what Slippery Rock did as opposed to what Seton Hill didn't do in that game.
Yeah, and if you want to go back and watch that, that's archived as well on Westmoreland Sports. But yes, Slippery Rock, that is a legitimate title contender if everyone stays healthy. We know they made it to the semifinals a couple of years ago. St. Vincent College gets a big win as they defeat Teal 41-7 for the Bearcats. It's their first conference victory. They improved to 2-1 overall, and the Tomcats fall to 0-4. That's it for the Week 4 scoreboard. Let's take a look at the top performers from this past week in the WPIAL. And for those maybe unfamiliar with how we do it, it'll be the top passer, rusher, and receiver around the entire WPIAL, and then the top county performers if they eclipse 100 yards. Well, for passing, the top performer, we mentioned Leechburg can put up some points. Their quarterback, Thomas Burke, led the way, 11 of 16 passing, 328 yards for Burke and Blue Devils, as he was the top passer in the WPIAL. Not that far behind, however, was Greensburg Salem's Hayden Teska, 14 of 29, 267 yards. Tristan Goodwin of Valley, 12 of 17 throwing for 145 yards. Connor Donnelly of Franklin Regional, 17 of 28 for 118 yards. And Tyler Reese, Mount Pleasant area's quarterback, completes just 4 passes, 4 of 6, but they went for 115 yards to round out the top passers. The rushing leader was Landon Stevenson of Mapletown, 261 yards to lead the entire district. But Robbie Labuda of Mount Pleasant area nearly got to 200 in his own right. He rushed for 193 yards, 10 yards behind Caden DiCaprio of the Borough Buccaneers. He went for 183. Then it was Devin Whitlock, the hero for Bell Vernon area, 163 yards on the ground. Nick Beidel, the senior for Ligonier Valley, rushed for 122. And Brock Wilkins for Kiski area, 106 yards and the only touchdown, and the Cavs win.
I got to mention, Brock Wilkins back in the fold. Nice to see that.
Yes.
CJ Hepler did a great job with, Brock only playing defense after kind of being slowed down by an injury. But we saw why Brock Wilkins is also a heck of a running back after he scored the only touchdown last week.
Good 1-2 punch, potentially.
Yeah,
Coach Albert said, well, we have now depth that maybe we didn't realize we had before the injury. Lastly, receiving, Ziggy Mcintosh of Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. 198 yards on 9 receptions. We did not, from what I saw, have any Westmoreland County receivers go over 100 yards.
Which surprised me with Teska throwing for over 267.
Spread it out.
To be exact.
Apparently.
Yeah, he did. Must have used a lot of receivers.
Yeah, I know he used his tight end Jaden Stevens as well, had a big game. Jaden's always a very talented player. Good to see him put up some big numbers. That'll do it for the top performers from Week 4 of the WPIAL high school football season. We'll take a quick break, but when we continue here on Westmoreland, the Gridiron, it is time for
Plays of the Week.
That will be upcoming as we roll along right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network.
At Sendell Mitsubishi,
Buying your new vehicle is as easy as stop, shop, and roll. Stop wasting time in the dealership. Shop online in just a few easy steps.
roll on home in your new Mitsubishi.
Or have it delivered to your door.
SendellMitsubishi.com. At Sendell Volkswagen,
Buying your new vehicle is as easy as stop, shop, and roll. Stop wasting time in the dealership. Shop online in just a few easy steps.
roll on home in your new Volkswagen.
Or have it delivered to your door.
SendellVolkswagen.com.
Your next golf adventure awaits at Manor Valley Golf Course in Export. Manor Valley offers 18 scenic holes over gentle sloping fairways and the purest putting surfaces around. Manor Valley Golf Course in Export is the perfect place